What's up, everyone? Welcome to the March 16th edition of DraftKings Tournament Plays presented by PrizePicks. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoneyDFS. And as a reminder, you get one free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum when you sign up and make a deposit at PrizePicks. Be sure to use the code Awesemo to receive a 100% first deposit bonus up to $100. Tonight, we have a massive 12-game NBA slate. It should be a fun one for tournaments. 12-game slates can be a bit overwhelming, but it also means that you kind of can just play whoever you want. There's always a lot of really, really good options. We're waiting on some injury news to open up value. As always, be sure to tune into the deeper dive and live before lock in the 2 hours leading up until tip. But for now, we're going to take a look at 5 of the top tournament options on DraftKings. The way things currently look. Starting at number 5, Reggie Jackson is $8,100 in the last game of the night, taking on the Toronto Raptors. Jackson is not a standout option on tonight's slate, but he does have about a 7% chance of being in the optimal lineup compared to only about 4% projected ownership. Jackson is 8,100. He's around a fantasy point per minute player when Marcus Morris is in and Paul George is out, as will be the case tonight. And Jackson is likely to give you around 36 minutes if tonight's game against the Raptors is competitive. The Clippers are 1-point underdogs, so no reason to think that it won't be. Jackson is someone that certainly can just give you a good score at low ownership. Number 4, D'Angelo Russell, $7,700 point guard and shooting guard eligible, projected for about 5% ownership with an 8% chance of being in the optimal lineup. Minnesota is waiting on a lot of injury news. Most of it shouldn't have too much of an impact on Russell, but Patrick Beverley is questionable. If Beverley is ruled out, Russell's expected assist percentage would increase a bit. But one way or the other, you're talking about someone that averages well over a fantasy point per minute, is likely to give you 32 to 34 minutes if this game's competitive, and has an excellent matchup against the Los Angeles Lakers, who just do not play defense. They play at a fast pace. They're just an awful team at this point. Minnesota has a very healthy 126 implied total. And just because this is a huge slate and there's plenty of guys to pay up for, you're seeing Russell go a little bit under-owned in the mid-range. Number 3, Al Horford, $5,800 power forward and center option, projected for about 3% ownership with a 9% chance of being in the optimal lineup. The Celtics take on the Golden State Warriors tonight in Golden State. In general, I think this is a game that is much better in real life than it is in DFS, but most people seem to agree with that. And as a result, you're getting some very low owned players in a game that is likely to be competitive. The Warriors are only 2-point favorites against Boston. Horford is likely to give you 32 minutes or so. He's over a fantasy point per minute player, probably just a little bit underpriced and going a little bit under-owned tonight at $5,800. Number 2, Bobby Portis, $6,300, taking on the Sacramento Kings. He's projected for 7% ownership with a 10% chance of being in the optimal lineup. We saw Brook Lopez return to the floor for the Bucks last game, but that had more of an impact on Serge Ibaka's minutes than it did on Portis. Ibaka only played 7 minutes. Portis still played 28, potentially could have played a little bit more down the stretch. So, in certain game situations, you can still see 30 minutes maybe from Portis here, but he's around a 1.2 fantasy point per minute guy this season. He has a fantastic matchup against the Sacramento Kings, and DraftKings has finally given him power forward eligibility. For most of his recent games, he's been center only, which has created situations where Portis looks good, but it's difficult to prioritize him over other options. Now, with that power forward eligibility, it makes him even more likely to be in the optimal lineup. And number 1, Kristaps Porzingis, $7,200 with power forward and center eligibility. Tonight, Porzingis takes on the Denver Nuggets in Washington. The Wizards are 7-point dogs. They have a 111 implied total. We've seen Porzingis' playing time slowly increase. He got up to about 28 minutes last game. I'm expecting around 28 minutes again tonight against Denver, but you could certainly get a couple minutes more potentially from Porzingis. He's been very productive so far with Washington, averaging around 1.4 DraftKings points per minute. And if you go back to his time with Dallas, he also averaged around 1.35 to 1.4 fantasy points per minute when Luka Doncic wasn't on the floor. That's very similar to the role that we can expect him to have going forward with the Wizards. At 7,200, if Porzingis gives you 28 minutes tonight, he's likely to give you a pretty good score. And there is that non-zero chance that he plays a couple more minutes and looks even better. At only 12% ownership with a 17% chance of being in the optimal lineup, Porzingis currently grades out as the top tournament option on DraftKings. So to recap, the top 5 tournament options on DraftKings for tonight's 12-game slate. Number 5, Reggie Jackson. Number 4, D'Angelo Russell. Number 3, Al Horford. Number 2, Bobby Portis. And number 1, Kristaps Porzingis.